That's good.
So what we've done is laid out our gap. So if you come up here, we have our 1/4 inch gap that we started with, okay? Now this is gonna get painted black inside here, so you won't see it. To some people, this gap might be a bit extreme, but I don't like them anywhere near each other. And once this is painted black and this car is done with all the blue, I'm telling you, it'll look good. Just wait till the end and see. But this is what, you know, we're too tight here, so you don't want this, okay? I know it looks good, even that right there. I know a lot of people will be like, man, that looks really good, but it's just, when you're trying to fit that on, okay, or these race cars, you know, the whole front end shake when they're staging and stuff like that. Stuff moves around a lot, man. So this hood, you know, it moves around a decent amount. Now it's not, you know, it's not moving no 1/4 inch or nothing like that, so by no means am I saying that it's moving that much. I'm just saying that this right here is just too close. So when you go to paint this, you're gonna have paint build up on the inside of the fender, you're gonna have paint build up on the edge of the hood, from primers, base coats, clear coats, all that's gonna tighten your gap. So if you have a gap right now that is that, you know, small, then by the time you go to paint this thing, it's going to close up. When you go to put this hood on, if you leave a gap that small, when you go to put this hood on, this thing is going to freaking, you know, chip. You're gonna accidentally put it too far that way and hit it, and it's gonna chip, and you're just not gonna have any, you know, any play on it. So all of this is too tight. Okay, this is too tight, especially for a race car. Up there, that's more where I want to be, okay? That's more where I want to be. Over here, that's more where I want to be. Now remember, this is crooked. We're about to straighten all this out. And then once we get all this straightened out, we'll take a DA and run down the side and straighten this out. So this is a rough cut. That one up there, you could have shrunk that down a little tighter. So I went off of, from the cowl to here and, you know, did a straight line and cut it. It's gonna be hard to get these gaps perfect. I know a lot of people that are doing a race car, they, you know, I got the comment all the time last time on the channel, you know, that it's just a race car, don't sweat it. I get it, but you still want your gaps kind of symmetrical. But I just want to, you know, we're about to cut this and open this gap up more, and I just wanted to let everybody know that if you're doing this yourself, really think about, you know, paint chips, man. You take this hood on and off between every round to cool it or whatever. This is not the place or the time to have tight gaps. It's just not. The more you could take this hood on and off without chipping it, the happier the customer is going to be if it's a customer job, and the happier you're going to be if you put a bunch of work into this hood, a bunch of paint, and, you know, then you're chipping it and it's hitting the edges, you know, or it's just so tight when you're trying to fight with it. You see people at the track all the time when they're trying to put the front end on or the hood on, they're bumping the fenders, pushing them in. That's what I'm talking about. These front ends, y'all know they have a lot of play. Everybody knows that. A lot of wiggle. You've cut most of the structure out and, you know, made it to the minimum so that it's lightweight. You got to open them gaps up, man. Them gaps cannot be, they cannot be tight like that. Same thing across the bottom down here. We're gonna open this up. Now, a lot of people would just straight up let this roll. But as you can see right here, this is on your fender, your body line, and you can see how much lower the hood lays down. When you buy these hoods, they're rough fit, okay? They need to be trimmed to fit. So this fits amazing in the front end, but we don't want it that tight. It's actually sitting on the paint right there, okay? You can see that. If you leave this like this and you just say, oh, that's good, you know, that's nice, I'm just gonna let that ride, then you're gonna be the one that has chip paint all across the front of your hood, chip paint across the nose. You're gonna have chip paint everywhere. You're gonna be that guy that the edges are all tore up because you chose to leave tight gaps around the hood versus, you know, just opening them things up a little. Same thing you can see over here on this fender. You can see where my edge of my tape right here is the bottom of the hood. so you can see how much it hangs down below where it actually should be. So you need to cut that straight across. That's my old tape line. I'm about to run a new one on that, and then we're going to take the hood back off. We're going to open these gaps up, open all these gaps up, and open them up so they can breathe and they're not bumping and grinding against each other while this car is staging or at the track. When you're cutting these, you also these cuts you want to stand your grinder straight up and down. Okay, this cut right here you want this straight up and down at 90. But these cuts, when you cut this, you don't want to cut this at a 90. You really want to kind of fold it under a little. Now, not too far. I've probably got it cut at about a 90, or an angle like that. So a 90 would be more like this, and I've got it cut more like that. You don't want it like this, because then that's creating another sharp edge that the paint will just chip right off of. So the goal is not to create a sharp edge, but the goal is also, you know, not to cut at a 90, because then you got this little edge right here riding directly down on, you know, whatever it's sitting on, and that's more likely to bust the fiberglass up. So just give it a little bit of an angle back so that hopefully it sits on it more flat, but not so flat that the front nose is then super sharp. So same thing, I cut these corners out. I'm gonna take my grinder that we use over here that has a curve in it, and we're just going to slightly clean these up. And remember, again, don't obsess over this stuff, because it's so easy to get obsessed over. So this is what we use in round areas, to get so obsessed over this stuff that you beat yourself up and you spend a ton of time on it. Because you got to remember, this is a man-made cut right here. There's no way that I can hold this perfectly straight. You know, I try to use a straight edge, but it's still just not, it's just not going to be perfect, man. You're trimming fiberglass, so don't beat yourself up too bad on it if yours don't look that great. You know, just be happy with it. And you can see that this is all curvy down the side. That's when we're now going to take the sander and go at a 90. Basically, you're sanding this like this, and we're going to sand down the side of it like that, so that we can straighten all that out. But right now I'm going to come in here very gently, and I'm just going to put a little curve, a little bevel in these things. So you also need to roll these edges, okay? Get rid of that sharpness. You can't hardly see it. Okay, you can see how we cut right there. So cut your edge off, cut your sharp corner off. Sharp corners are your worst enemy when you're dealing with fiberglass, so you don't want that. You can kind of see our bevel cut right there. It looks like a 90, but you can see even when I was sanding at the angle I had them. But make sure you run a 45. Let's see here, where's my sander? Make sure you're running a 45 like this over these edges, and a 45 on that, you know, and square. You want that edge to be round. Factory car hoods are not square. You don't want your fiberglass part square. It will chip the paint off the edge. You want that a slight rounded on the edge. So now we're gonna stick it back on, put 4 Dzuses in it, and we're gonna start chasing our cuts up top, you know, to go up to the cowl. It's closing in on 4:30, so I'm definitely running out of time, but that's how much time this kind of stuff takes to make sure this is right. And like I said, we didn't want to do this later, because then you're doing twice the work and you're taking a chance of chipping or scratching the fenders. We want to do it now before we take all that stuff apart. That way we can take it all apart, paint it, and then put it back together. All right, so now we put our hood back on, but you can see our front end, we are looking a million times better. Now it's starting to look like an actual car. So it's sunk back in like it's supposed to be. You know, it's sitting in there. It's not rubbing. You can move the front end. You know, we have gaps. We have clearances all the way around it. You know, up this side you have a gap all the way running up it, and then up this side we have our gap all the way up it. So we have plenty of space. That stuff's not going to be bumping and grinding against each other. All of our corners right here are rolled. You know, that's how cars from the factory are. They're not square. Whenever you they're not sharp square. Normally they're rolled slightly. They're definitely not pointed like this. And our gap looks pretty good, you know, matching that. That was already cut, so you can actually have a bigger gap up here than there, but it matches pretty good. So this thing's gonna look good after it's got paint on it. And like I said, we're gonna paint these black, so that will disappear in there. And then if you wanted to get fancy, you could also put you a rubber molding piece in there to add a little bit to it. So this is the one that we have got to cut back. So we are going to leave this gap right here, this width, and we're going to match this over here to keep that the same. And this one look pretty close, so they'll look pretty uniform when all that's cut. But trust me, by the time you paint this thing and primer it and all that, paint that black, this thing's gonna look good whenever. All right, so we took our tape measure, put it under there, hooked it to the edge of our cowl, and now we're gonna get our measurement out here, which is gonna be roughly 8.5, okay? Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna get our tape measure out from underneath. We're gonna come up here and sit it across the top. So with our tape measure sitting on the edge right here, we are going to come right here and we're gonna mark 8.5, okay? That's where, that is gonna be where the edge of our cowl is, but we need to cut out more than 8.5. So then you're gonna take your tape measure, and since I'm doing this one-handed, I'm not gonna undo that one. And we're gonna check our gap right here, which is gonna be, let's see here, that's a big quarter, basically 3/8, okay? So then we're gonna come over here, and we're gonna add a big quarter to this. So a big quarter is gonna be about right here. Now we're gonna connect that dot to this dot and cut it, and that should be money. If you were doing a brand new hood that you just got in, you would basically do the same exact thing. Of course, you would cut your one cut down the cowl where the cowl meets the flat, the cowl hood, the top, and then your other piece, you would literally hook your tape measure just like I did, measure it exact same. You'd be measuring 2 points, and then you'd be transferring them points and measurements to the hood, and that's what your line would be for where you need to cut. Now, always when you're cutting a brand new one and it's hard to see underneath it, always measure and then close up 1/4 of an inch. So go like at least 1/4 of an inch, if not half an inch, less than what you thought you needed to cut. That way you can get most of the chunk out of there, and then you can just double check, and then you can shave back another 1/4 or 1/8 or whatever until you get it right. So we've got our tape on here to the edge right there, and then it goes to our mark, which actually I messed up. So that would have been not enough. Well, I didn't mess up. I would have just had to cut it twice because that wouldn't have been enough. So this mark right here, our second mark we made, that's how much we're gonna take out of this. All right, so there is our hood cut. Now remember, this was the side that was already cut. All I did was clean it up. So my cleanup job looks beautiful now than compared to a second ago. But the problem is that they did square cut this, so I had to roll this the best I could with sandpaper to give a curve in there, but somebody square cut it. If you go back to Randy's video, normally I advise you stop your cut about right here and stop your cut about right here, and then of course you know, roll it just like, you know, radius to edges. So I radiused all these edges, radiused all of that, got everything curved, radiused this edge back here. I mean, this thing is looking beautiful. Come over here, and we matched it, baby. Look at that. Now, do you see how good this gap, all this gap looks nice and equal? Everything looks nice and equal, and you don't have to worry about busting your paint up. You don't have to worry about chipping anything. So, was able to, you know, match the radius on this side compared to the other side. This one might need a little bit more in there, but after it's painted and everything, it's gonna look really, really good. So all of that's radius. So this thing has turned out amazing today. Sadly, it is 5 o'clock now, and that's all we're literally gonna get done for today is fitting a hood. All right, welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday morning, and we're gonna try to get some stuff done on this Fox body today. So yesterday we got all the Dzus rails put in. We got the fender, not the fender. We got all the Dzus rails put in, got the hood fitted on the car, all that's done. The only other thing we have to do is add basically the mini Dzus rails, little tabs, for the front of the hood up there on the cowl panel. But before we can do that, I'll probably go ahead and do that this morning. But before I do that, I got to sand out the body filler on that one side, so that it's flat, because obviously when you slick body filler on, it's wavy and clumpy and all that, so you don't want to be trying to lay out where the Dzus is going to go with your body filler. So we're going to come in here this morning. We are going to slick all of this out, that way we can fit our other Dzus rail, because right here where all this crap is about where that little tab needs to go. So we'll probably get that slicked out, lay our hood back on there, and I've already kind of marked where I want it to go. So the Dzus fastener is going to go right there. We'll lay it back on there, get that drilled. We'll probably even go ahead and drill the firewall for it. That way, if the body filler cracks, we can fix it now. Let's get this sanded out, and then let's finish fitting this hood. The last couple steps on the back side. Everything else will be done on the front with the Dzus fasteners. However, he wants to do that. Honestly, I would build something that attaches to these points right here. Since these unbolt, I would definitely build something off of them. But whatever he wants to do, he can do with the front end. I'm just going to try to get this thing knocked out. So let's get this sanded and then get them made up. That way we can move on today to finally some dolphin glaze and some primer, hopefully. All right, so we got all that sanded out. I try to take as much filler as I can off of all this because, like I said, we just had the conversation about how thick this was and how we didn't want it too thick. It's not perfectly like flat. If you held a straight hedge on there, this area in here kind of does a roll. You can see, you know, from up here that this cowl panel kind of rolls out. You know, it kind of rolls, it rolls like that a little bit. Like when they built this cowl panel, they did not intend in any way, shape, or form for this thing to be, you know, straight like the roof of the car. So therefore, you got two options. You either put a lot of filler on it and you block it straight, or you completely cut it out and put a completely flat, straight piece of aluminum in there, you know, and match all that. In our situation, this is a garage car, again, so the hood is not going to be off at car shows and all that. So we are just going to kind of let it roll, okay? If you can picture it, it's just going to be a smooth roll. So we're just following the curves and stuff like that, and it's just going to be smoothed, not flattened and straightened necessarily. And, you know, it goes back to, I don't want all this filler on here because if you have to attach something through here, if we do, you know, I'd love to nutsert them, but I have to drill the hole to a 1/8 hole for rivets first, and then I'll look in there, see how thick that filler is, see if it goes through smooth with the 1/8 and doesn't hit no weld. And if it looks like it go through smooth, then we'll probably step it up to the 9/32 hole that I need for a M5 nutsert. And if that holds without cracking the filler, then we're good. But the thicker the filler, the more issues you're going to have, even on Randy's car. If you were to look underneath the hood, I noticed this weekend there's a couple bolt holes that are through there that don't have anything in them, and there's a couple spider cracks coming off of them. So this car, you know, flexes when it's staging, and, you know, on the two-step or whatever, y'all have seen it. You've seen it 100 million times if you're into drag racing. And this cowl is, you know, going to take some of that load. I mean, the whole entire car is a unibody car, so the whole car is designed to take load. So therefore, everywhere you drill a hole or you put body filler and you put a piece, something through body filler, it can cause stress cracks and cause the body filler to crack later down the road. So I'm gonna finish cleaning up this little bit around this edge. I'm not gonna time lapse that, and then we are gonna move right into dolphin glaze, and I'm gonna show y'all how to do that. And then, man, we should be moving. Let's see here, we still have to do the Dzus fasteners on the hood real fast, but after lunch, it's only like 10 o'clock right now, I think 9:30 something. After lunch or this evening, dude, we should be rolling into primer, y'all. We should finally get this thing into primer and get this thing taken apart. So it's looking good for today to finally get a primer, even though I feel like I'm about 3 or 4 days behind schedule of where I wanted to be at. So let's roll. All right, so we have built our pieces for our Dzus fasteners to go on the firewall. We've put our hood back on. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna mark where our center line of our Dzus fastener is. Let's grab a Sharpie. Okay, so we're gonna mark right here is gonna be our center line, our Dzus fastener, and then we are going to take the hood off and put the piece on there that we built. We're gonna put it flush with a little bit above this lip that's in here. I'll show you here in a second. Then we'll come back and clearance this out. That way this hood is, you know, sucked down a little and flatter. We'll clearance this out to make this drop down to where that sits like it's supposed to. And we'll use our depth gauge to set that also probably the best we can. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put our piece on here like this, and we're gonna set the height. So now this thing is gonna come up pretty decent. It's not gonna necessarily be perfect because, as you can see, then we start to run out of height where a hole goes. We want that hole in that metal like it is right there, which is beautiful. That way, you know, that one's right there on the edge. You'll see here, like that. So that one's close to the edge. That way, if we can keep it in as metal, we might be able to nut cert this thing. So I'm not gonna be able to do this with one hand. And you can also see that this piece is ramped up. So we're using our thinner pieces, smaller pieces that was left over from the original Dzus rails, and not the thicker stuff, because the thicker stuff would be a little bit harder to bend. And we want to be able to put this on there and then bend this, you know, like this or like this to whatever it needs to sit pretty much, you know, the same plane as the cowl and the hood. So we're gonna get this marked and get this drilled on there, and then move on to putting our hood back on and making sure our Dzuses will fall in to this one and that we don't need to use the thicker one. We're trying to avoid using the thicker one so that this is easier to bend and manipulate than this thick stuff. This thick stuff is really hard to bend, or harder. This thick stuff is harder to bend than that thin stuff, you know, and set your plane right. All right, so we've got our pieces on our firewall. I'll show you that here in a second. We've got our hood set back on. When you're working on anything, you're adding a Dzus or whatever, you know, you've got to put your other Dzuses in to make sure that hood's sitting right. So even if you have an existing hood and you want to add one more, so you've got to make sure your Dzuses are in, at least one in each corner to square it up. That way it's all right. That's very important. Got our hole drilled all the way down through our bracket. You can kind of see our bracket down there, about to take the hood off. And then we're going to redo the process that we went over yesterday in the last video on installing the springs and doing, you know, drilling a hole in the hood, all that stuff. So we're not going to cover that today because I've already did a very good video on DIY on Dzus rails. So if you're new to the channel on this video, then go back and look for our video on how to build your own $20 Dzus rails, and that's going to go over the whole entire steps of how to actually do this next step that I'm going to do. All right, so we pulled our hood off. I expect y'all, if y'all use some of these techniques or how-tos on your own projects, y'all go to the Paint and Paper Hustle Facebook page. Share the pictures with me, man. Some of y'all are already on there. Some of y'all have already sent pictures, you know, of different things that you've done or whatever. Post them to the page if it allows you. If not, man, send them. I want to see what y'all are working on, or how you might be using some of these situations in your own. So now you can see we have our things mounted there. They stick up a little. They're going to. I mean, they're going to have to. There's really no other choice. It would be nice to make a T-fitting, basically a plate that went all the way to here, and then it had another piece of aluminum welded to it that you could attach to there. That'd be pretty cool in the shape of a T, but we don't have time to fab all that. Maybe if it was on my personal car, you know, I'd fab something like that so that it could sit inside this track for a little more support, but this is what we got for now. So we've got screws in it, just temporary, so we can take it back off, since again my clecos are not here. After paint, you know, we'll get rivets on it. We did bend them, so they are bent. I don't know if you can see, they're bent basically close to the same plane of the cowl, roughly. So they're a little below the cowl. I wanted the outside of this up a little more to kind of help carry the weight of the hood, since I couldn't come up with this one because I was reusing these thin brackets, and this is what we're working with. If somebody wanted to redo these, you could, you know, do a 2-inch by 2-inch piece, and it would come way down here. It would look a little more tacky, but you know, it would help probably support it a little bit so it don't roll. You can see that one's bent also. A lot of people now just straight up come on here and just weld tabs to that. So if you wanted to just weld a tab, cut you a steel tab, weld a tab to that, then that would be perfect. The only thing I don't like about that is then they're not removable. So like I said, this is if it's in your way and you were trying to work here or something, you could just take the 2 screws out so they don't get hit all up and damaged, or if they needed to be painted and touched up or whatever. You know, I just like stuff removable. I don't like stuff permanently mounted, because then you can't change it. You know, if you were to change something and you need this hole moved or whatever, then you got the holes there in the firewall and you can remake your brackets, but at least they're not permanently mounted. So I hate it when you see race cars that have been cut all over the place and paint grinded, and then of course you don't go back and paint anything because everything was freaking welded versus clamped on. So I'm not a fan of permanent structures. I'm a huge fan of making stuff removable. So we're gonna drill these out, install our springs, and then recheck the hood, make sure it fits, and if that fits, we are freaking done with this hood, and it is time to go get lunch almost. The minor details always get you. So I got the Dzus fastener to put it in from the bottom like we did yesterday. We ain't got no springs. So all that was on the car whenever he brought the car to me was just the 3 springs on each side, the 6 total. We used them up yesterday, so we don't have no springs. I think I have some springs at the house, so maybe I will just grab them this afternoon, bring them in, and I'll just have to bill them for 2 springs or whatever and install them. So I guess we are done with the hood for today. I know the hole straight through it. I know my hole is correct on the hood. We're gonna, I guess, keep it moving on to the next step. All right, so that's gonna be a wrap for this one. We're gonna have to break this thing up into segments just because it got so much content. Hopefully y'all are enjoying it and learning something, and we'll stay tuned for the next one. So like, comment, subscribe, and share, you know the deal, and I will catch you on the next one.